So good morning, everyone. Welcome to Elevating Transit, the rising potential of gondolas and cable cars in urban transportation. We've got a very interesting conversation and really looking forward to this. I want to introduce Alice Brava, who's our moderator, and she will kick off our topic and discussion.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this very exciting topic. You know, as a former transit director for Miami-Dade County, the most exciting thing at a project is getting to a groundbreaking, right? And then eventually there's a ribbon cutting. Sometimes you have several groundbreakings, and then the ribbon cutting actually happens. But you know, the biggest issue oftentimes with projects is how long it takes to get to the beginning. So today we're talking about aerial transportation gondolas, and we're fortunate to have a panel of experts here that are either operating projects or helping develop projects. And so we're gonna get some information as to how maybe this is an innovative solution that cities can implement quickly. So first I'm gonna introduce Millicent Williams, Portland Director, Department of Transportation, and she's has an amazing varied background, originally from DC, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what is your passion?
So I'll start with my passion. My passion, professional passion, is serving communities and serving them well. I learned that best when I took a 2-year, what my team now calls sabbatical, to consult, and realized that was not my bag. So I am the Portland Bureau of Transportation's director. I've been serving in that role since July of last year. Prior to that, as I mentioned, I was consulting for a couple of years with a firm called OTAC, an A&E firm in Oregon. But before that, I was at the Bureau, running the capital program, and then I was the deputy director. I don't have a traditional background in transportation. I am not an engineer. What I am is a problem solver, and that's what brought me to Portland. I've, as you mentioned, worked in DC many years, serving in various roles, supporting various mayors, moved to Texas, worked in local government there as well, but have found a home in Portland, in a place that is bubbling with energy and innovation. And I'm excited to talk about the tram that we have, the Portland Aerial Tram. It is an exciting part of our city. It's an icon in our city, and the Bureau is excited about being able to provide management for that.
Excellent. And we're going to come back and see a few slides about that project. And then next we have Jeral, the CEO of Swyft. You've had very interesting jobs, worked at Google, and so we know you're full of innovation. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your passion.
That's right. I have a career web, not a career ladder, where I've done a number of things from tech to politics to data, but it's always been around transportation. That's my love and passion. But it was only in Google's real estate division that I figured out that it was not just transportation, it was specifically transportation that affects the urban form. And I believe my love of data, and as you said, innovation, brought us to realizing some facts about urban development that says it can be better with the right transportation. And the form of the development and the form of transportation are so interrelated that in Google's case, we wanted to really expand and densify our campuses. There was nothing out there that would allow you to do that, even things that are cutting edge, flying or tunneled or autonomous. So we created something new. And so for the last 4 years, my focus has been on Swyft cities and bringing this new aerial form of transportation to market that, as we say, is the cheapest way to add high capacity in a congested area.
Fantastic. And we'll see a video of what you're planning to launch in New Zealand in a little bit.
Yes.
And next we have David Grannis, Director of Zero Emissions Transit. And you have very amazing background in terms of the things you've been involved with, I guess dating back to the Olympics in 1984 and the first TIFIA loans, et cetera. So a little bit about yourself and your passion.
Thanks very much. Great to be here. David Grannis with Zero Emissions Transit. As Alice says, I have quite a varied, tangled background. I span all 3 sectors, public, private, and nonprofit, over my career. I am also, like Millicent, not a trained transportation professional. I'm not an engineer. I have a background in Renaissance history. So therefore, I think a little bit differently about things. And so I guess my passion, to Alice's question, is really, taking on problems and thinking quite differently. My background spans in the public sector, as she said, working on the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. We get to host them again, so 3 times in 100 years. I'm a Portland native, so I'm a big fan of the Portland streetcar and the Portland aerial tram. I knew the folks that worked on that and developed it. In my private sector work, I've had the pleasure of working for companies such as Walt Disney, doing all their transportation at what now became California Adventure, a lot of studio master plans, did the Pasadena Light Rail Project, did the Alameda Corridor funding program, which spawned TIFIA. And so I've really, as a famous New York Yankee said, I'm the luckiest man in the world.
Fantastic. And next, someone who needs no introduction, Kusha. I think everybody knows him. He's currently Senior Vice President at Plenary, and certainly has been involved all over the world in leading major transportation initiatives. So, Sia, what's your passion?
Thanks, Alice. First and foremost, compared to my colleagues, I probably have the most boring career of anybody. I'm a civil engineer by background. I've been in this business 44 years. I've been a planner, a designer, a construction, and now I work in the private equity side of deal structures. My passion from the very early on has been mobility, access, equity, and removing barriers where people can work, live, play in communities that really represent the essence of who we are as human beings. And if we can use infrastructure to make that happen, then by all means, let's really spend a lot of time and effort doing that. So really glad to be here, a part of this conversation, and we'll see where the conversation will take us today.
Great. And I want to say for the record, I'm a civil engineer, and I started on big infrastructure projects at FDOT, and I went to then the city of Miami, where I became the deputy city manager. And you meet people, all different walks of lives, and what their needs are and what their challenges are. And the one thing that can help everybody is effective transportation. And we're talking about how they get to work, how they get to school. Some people have multiple jobs. Some people go to school so that they can get a better job. So the ability to deliver these projects quickly, that's where you see how that interwoven fabric between transportation and effective cities and improving people's qualities of life. So I thank you all for being here. So first, let's start with Millicent. Let's see the size of your project, and we'll see some data, O&M, why this project came to be, and what type of solutions you think it's applicable for.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, the Portland Bureau of Transportation is responsible for managing and maintaining the Portland aerial tram. We work with Doppelmayr. They are the boots on the ground team that runs the tram every day. We have, it's not a new project. It's been in existence since 2007. It took about 7 years to get from concept to completion. And the tram is located in the South Waterfront District. When the tram was built, the South Waterfront District, you'll see it down in the bottom, I don't know what side that is, right corner. It was a lot of brownfields. That was a place where there was shipping that was happening. And so there wasn't a dynamic use of the land and space. But what we identified was that with the Oregon Health and Science University campus, which is up in the top left-hand corner, there's a campus down at the bottom in the South Waterfront District that needed to connect. And there was also the need for the connection between PSU and downtown. So between streetcar and then whatever the option was going to be, the city decided to look at the option of doing an aerial tram. And so you can go to the next slide. So there's a straight line that leads you from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill. The team, and when I say the team, it was both a set of planners from outside of the city, and then some of the internal staff was bedded into those planning teams, came up with an idea to use a tram. We looked at several different options. You can go to the next slide. We looked at the funicular rail. We thought maybe streetcar. We could add a line and go up through the hills to get to the hospital facility. We looked at gondolas. We thought about buses. We looked at people movers, but we landed on the tram because it was the most affordable, least invasive way for us to quickly move, in many instances, thousands of people a day to and from the facility. It's used not just for regular passengers who live in the community, but it is used also to ensure that patients are able to make it to and from the spaces that they need to go to, hospitals at the top of the facility, office buildings and other labs and science centers, specific centers are at the bottom of the hill. And so we were able to devise a solution that made the most sense for that part of town. So as you see, we can do roughly 1,000 folks an hour if running at full capacity. We did more than that during the pandemic. We didn't do more people than that. We did more trips than we normally would do during the pandemic because during that time, we actually closed down public use of the tram and made it exclusive use for the hospital to transport patients back and forth. But you see, option compared to a bus, it's 10 times better in terms of the ability to move people. Travel time is 4 minutes. That may seem like a long time, but you don't want to go any faster than that when you're going up the side of a mountain. It's fast enough. It didn't impact livability at all. In fact, when we initially started in the conversation about putting the tram in place, of course there were concerns from the folks who lived below. Now people are excited about living in a tram neighborhood. That's their signature. It's in their backyards, and nobody's looking in their windows. And so that was a concern, but we made efforts to ensure that we were careful about the way that we engaged with the community members who live there. And we made offers to folks who were interested in potentially selling their homes, who were going to be in the path of the tram. Nobody took the offer. Everybody was complaining about it, and then nobody took the offer. So, and then one of the things that you'll hear about probably several times over the course of this conversation is that maintenance and operations is pretty affordable, quite affordable, and safety is at a premium. The tram, in the 17 years that it's been running, year over year, 98.98% reliability. It has never stopped. Maybe an hour and a half total over the past 17 years.
That's the envy of the transit world.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And so then finally there are tremendous development impacts. As you saw on the previous slide, the brownfields that existed at the base of the tram, really it was not a place that people wanted to be. But it has become a place that people now want to be. You see several buildings there. There are even more. Not sure why I don't have even a more modern picture than that, but there's much more development there than you even see. 5,000 new jobs, 2,000 residential units, $125 million in public investment, and $1.4 billion in private investment created this new neighborhood and this new opportunity, a thriving neighborhood, actually. And so at the base of the tram, you'll see not only a bike valet, but there's also the streetcar runs right next to it. The light rail is just a couple of blocks down. Buses run down there as well. And that bottom picture on the right is one of my favorite views. You get to see Mount Hood every time you go up and down the tram. And so it's become not just a utility for the hospitals and for people who live in the community, but it is a tourist attraction, and we are able to charge $8.50 per ride, and nobody blinks at it. And so that helps to fund, and we raise the rates all the time. And that funds the $3.9 million in maintenance and operations fees that we have over the course of a year. But it's an amazing asset for us, and we're excited about the potential that it has. Will we do things in other parts of the city? Not sure about that yet, but there are opportunities for it to be a viable tool that we use as a part of our transit network.
So 3.9 million a year, O&M.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
pretty fantastic.
And we have two cars. They're named for two people, and they run all the time. I was there on Friday looking at the inner workings. It's pretty amazing. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, you'll see some of the pictures from that. But yeah, $3.9 million.
Amazing. So how would you rank this project in terms of ease of implementation? What was the secret sauce to sell the public on it?
Well, as I mentioned in my introductory comments, Portland kind of is known for being an innovator in transportation, in transportation innovation, looking to the future, being really futuristic, being really creative, and recognizing that we have all types of topography. How could we create something that was really going to be meaningful? It wasn't a hard sell for people who were interested in growing the communities that were impacted by it. It wasn't a hard sell for the hospital. The biggest issue we needed to make sure that was in place was the ability to have the stability at the base, because some of the research centers at the bottom need to have, one of them is a cancer research center. We needed to make sure that it wouldn't move because it moves all the time. So those were some of the considerations. Safety was a little bit of one, and we've only had one incident over the course of the past 17 years. I guess maybe I shouldn't tell you that. But a piece of a panel fell off. We fixed it, and no one was hurt. But that was the biggest barrier to being able to move quickly, was that we had to do a little bit of convincing for folks who were below.
Okay, fantastic. Well, let's hear about Jeral's project with Swift cities in New Zealand, and I think you're building on this and providing new innovations in terms of point-to-point service, right?
Correct, yes. When we started this project, Project Swyft, it was not intended to be creating a cableway system. We just had simple goals of everything from reliability and sustainability, but cost effectiveness, and most importantly, attractiveness to users. What is going to be a transportation system that people choose to ride? Not a system of last resort, but a system of first choice. And through multiple phases of R&D work, I think we should have a video coming to help set some mental pictures to this. We came up with the notion that the cableway, as Millicent said, is the most cost-effective way to do things, but it's typically limited. It typically can only go in that straight line like she showed. It can typically only go to two destinations. So you have to change that. It has to be more dynamic. It has to go where the people want to go. And so what you see here looks like a ski resort gondola. But in reality, those cables, everything ends up being different. The cables aren't moving. Those vehicles were driving themselves. Now they can continue and choose a different path. So as they reach an intersection, they can turn in new directions, which the traditional gondolas can't even turn. But most importantly, they can switch, and they can choose a unique path. So now, instead of having the big vehicles that are going back and forth between two stations all day, they operate like a taxi. You get in, tell it where you're going, and it's going to choose the path that you need to get you from origin to destination. Now, some environments, like an airport or something, you may operate under a more fixed schedule, fixed route. But
So this is true PRT, personal rapid transit.
if you like that term, sure. I think that has a lot of baggage
I do.
from. Okay.
A lot easier for me to invest in it if it's called the PRT.
Okay, excellent. Yes, yeah. And so I would say it's modern with there's been a lot of people with good ideas without the delivery side, without the expertise who've delivered large projects in public settings. So I have a team that has done that. Our hardware team is out of New Zealand. It's a big company that, one of the lucky breakthroughs here was working with a big company on the hardware. So it wasn't some small company with 5 engineers, but you had a team of 85 engineers who could bring in all the expertise to where now, okay, the safety, the reliability, all the system engineering, the abilities that are involved are represented in the development. So Swyft Cities has now a product that has a price point, a flexibility, and a market where our markets go from private sector, real estate development, ski resorts, I'll be vague on some of the other ones, but all the way into the public sector. We're generally looking for people, whether it's public or private, that have a problem, have a budget, have a timeline, and have a procurement system that's amenable to new ideas.
And regarding the project you're working on in New Zealand, what's the scope of it? How long, cost, anticipated O&M?
Many of these things start small. The whole basis of this, there's no end point like a traditional gondola, so you can expand in many directions. So the initial system in New Zealand is going to be still being determined whether it's 3, he keeps expanding it, 3 stations to 5 stations, 1.5 miles, but it expands across first. Phase 2 still is in one property owner's perspective. Phase 3 connects to the airport. Phases 4 and 5 to connect to developers nearby, and it just continues to grow from there. So it starts small, under a $20 million project. Looks like it's going to be under 15 to get it going. And then as you add on, you add vehicles, you add destinations. It scales, but it scales nicely. And that kind of each section becomes more cost effective than the previous because of the scaling factors.
And you have flexibility to expand the capacity, right?
Right.
As
You
the
add
system
vehicles
grows.
as you need. Instead of having all of your costs up front in a typical heavy infrastructure project, 90 to 95% of the work was in the infrastructure, and how many vehicles you have doesn't really matter, hardly matters. For us, about a third of the cost is in the vehicles. So 2/3 of your costs are set, but a third of your cost is variable, and you can scale up or down as needed depending on time and delivery schedules.
Fantastic, great. Well, why don't we hear what's happening in Los Angeles?
All right, I look forward to this, and hang on 1 second before you start that. I want to just make a few introductory comments because Portland really paved the way for me. I started working on this actually when I did the LA Union Station Master Plan back in 1990. I'm very old. And we really had a vision at that time in Los Angeles because LA Union Station is the transportation hub of the entire region. We have a 19 million person region in all of Southern California. And so this station really hosts a number of transit options. So the idea was Dodger Stadium, which is the most attended venue in Major League Baseball and has been for the last decade at least, will probably continue to be at least for a few more years with Mr. Ohtani there. So at the end of the day, we really wanted to create this connection between LA Union Station and Dodger Stadium, but our vision was larger than that in LA Union Station. We wanted to house all of the professional sports franchises in Southern California, either at Union Station or at Dodger Stadium. And so that master plan for LA Union Station included entitlement of 2 arenas over the tracks, one for hockey, one for basketball, and then football and baseball at the top of the hill. And as Millicent talked about, where you have topography, you have an opportunity. You also have a problem, but the problem always spawns an opportunity. And in this case, the opportunity was the topography didn't allow light rail, just because of the grades, didn't allow really anything except funicular or gondola. So this goes back to 1990, just by way of background about what you're going to see. The system we proposed, we started working on this. I've been working on this for a number of years. I won't say how many. And we really proposed back in 2018 to Metro to be our environmental clearance entity, since we're a private entity. The project's privately funded. And so at the end of the day, we got Metro to say yes through their unsolicited proposal process. They hosted and really were the lead agency for environmental clearance. And the project cleared environmental with full certification on February 22nd of this year. So we're now off and running to our permitting phase, and I'll talk a little more about where we're going from here, but let me give you an idea of what this is all about. This will give you a sense of kind of location, stations, and then a simulated ride on our system. Is there going to be sound? If not, I'll narrate. Okay. Enjoy the ride.
Imagine a new way to travel and be connected for a cleaner LA. Imagine an emissions-free transport network that soars above the city. One that brings together people and places, old neighborhoods and new experiences. And a chance to hard days in the sun with old friends and new ones. We can get there if we just set our sights high. We can get there together. LAART, 7-minute ride from Union Station, 0 emissions. The first permanent transit connection to Dodger Stadium.
And that last piece is really important. Since 1960 basically, there's been no permanent transit to Dodger Stadium. It's all funded over year. And there's shuttles and buses, and they're really not adequate for what we have. We have a 56,000 person capacity at Dodger Stadium. Average attendance last year was 49,000. That's average. So the buses can carry maybe 1,500 people to a game in the 2 hours before. So a little bit of specifics on the project, and then I'll be happy to take whatever questions you want to throw at me. Number one, you heard it was a 7-minute ride, so it's about 1.2 miles. We started at point to point, just like Millicent's project in Portland. We ended up, through community engagement, adding an interim station in Chinatown. This really will help from an economic development standpoint in Chinatown. They've been struggling. Chinatowns, if you've noticed around, at least the United States, have been struggling mightily. El Pueblo, which is the birthplace of Los Angeles, has also been struggling since COVID. So both of these areas have stations, and both of these areas will get a big boost, and they're very enthusiastic about it. So we have a midpoint station, which also happens to intersect with one of our light rail systems from the San Gabriel Valley. So that picks up 20% of what is normal attendance at a Dodger game. So there'll be 2 points of access to Dodger Stadium. I need to say also that we will have a different system. This is a 3S system. So you notice 3 cables there. Unlike an aerial tram, which is basically a cabin up, a cabin down, a gondola system is circulating. And we will have cabins, instead of the typical monocable cabin, which holds 8 to 10 people, we will have 30 to 40 people per cabin. So small buses, 53 cabins, and we can carry the same capacity, if not a little higher capacity, than LA's light rail system. So we can carry between 5,000 and 6,000 people per hour per direction, which you heard that Portland Aerial Tram carries about 1,000 per hour. We can carry 5,000 to 6,000 per hour. So we can load about 20 to 25% of an average Dodger game per game via the aerial tram and transit. If you have a ticket to the game, you ride for free. If you live or work in the area, you ride for free. That was all of what our compact with the community and the work we've done over the last 4 to 5 years. Real quickly, last pieces are important. Those 53 cabins, you will have a cabin arriving every 23 seconds. They're continually moving. They're very friendly. As Millicent said, they're extremely safe. This is amongst the most, in fact, if not the most safe mode of transportation in the world. And quiet. We did the same thing that they did in Portland. We took a page from Portland and have been working with the community. Yes, everybody's upset about it. My experience with over 40 years of doing transportation projects is people are very upset about it. When they ride it and experience it, they love it, and they were always for it.
All right, so what would you say is the overall cost of the project?
So the overall cost of the project has grown because we've added a lot of components to the project. So we started out, it was estimated at about $150 million for the project. We're now at about $350 to $400 million for the project. We're still absolutely fine, privately funded. Our primary funding source is sponsorship and tourism. Just like Millicent said, tourism's a big part of these systems. And in Los Angeles, with the Olympics coming again, and our timetable is such that we will be open and operating by January of 28. And with our environmental clearance, we're now okay with that. So that will be a big attraction during the Olympics. And you're 200 feet above the city. You can see the ocean, you can see the San Gabriels, you can see the entire city. So we expect this to be a big tourist attraction as well. So those are the 2 primary revenue sources. That's why we're able to say, if you have a ticket to the game, you ride for free. The one caveat is I had a call from a guy that said, I'm not a Dodger fan. I want to see the Giants play. And I said, well, we'll take you, but we're going to drop you off at the Rose Bowl. We simply can't take you to Dodger Stadium.
Do you have a projection of what your annual O&M will be?
Yeah, just like Millicent said, the O&M on these systems, both the construction, because the footprint is light, and the O&M is really, really efficient. So our O&M is projected to be around 6.5, 7 million a year, which is really, really low. We have a much higher capacity system, a little more maintenance, 53 cabins, so we're in a little bit different scenario than the 2 cabins on the Portland aerial tram, but it's very low. And I love Jeral's system. It just, for us, capacity-wise, wasn't quite big enough to really carry the loads that we need to carry. And I need to underscore that we're serving the community 365 days a year, not just during baseball. We have LA's oldest and second largest park, Elysian Park, which is a phenomenal open space facility that surrounds lots of neighborhoods, 0 transit access to Elysian Park today. So we will be providing a whole mobility hub at the top of the hill with access to Elysian Park as well.
And last question, if the demand were there, could you add additional vehicles?
So this is more of a traditional gondola system. What we can do is we plan, as long as we plan our endpoint stations for the potential of an add-on, which we're doing, then we can do that. But typically, it's not the same flexibility as what Jeral's describing, where the system itself, those cabins themselves of the cars, are the ones that are navigating the system. Ours is a ropeway system, so it's end-to-end point, and it's a loop. We can add on another loop to it as long as we plan for that, but it's a little bit different technology.
Fantastic. So, Sia, I consider you the encyclopedia. This seems like a fantastic solution. Is there any hope of this becoming something that cities in the United States can embrace and maybe perhaps have federal funding and participation? What are the maybe policy challenges, and where else in the world do you think there are successful examples for permutations of what we've discussed this morning?
Well, let me first start by talking about other systems around the world. You know, if you look across Europe, North Africa, Latin America, there are great many examples of aerial gondola systems in operation today that do just what Millicent and David talked about. They provide a circulatory system that traditionally navigates a significant change in elevation. Gondolas have always been deemed probably the best solution for those. At the same time, although that is a great advantage, it is also a disadvantage because most people look at them as a very limited solution for a very specific application. That disadvantage also adds to the concept that aerial gondolas, as opposed to being a transit system, they're a novelty system, right? So in order for us to get across that mindset, a couple of things need to happen. First and foremost, we heard what David said, we heard what Millicent said. Transit was created inside HUD back in the day, Housing Urban Development in Washington, really as a mechanism to provide access and mobility to underserved communities. Then we forgot about that entire concept. How is it that the second largest park in LA doesn't have transit access? How is it that the underserved communities that were supposed to have been served by transit don't have transit? So you have to, a single mother has to get up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, walk 3 blocks, take 2 buses to get to an LRT system, to get to downtown where she works. So again, I think we as a country have forgotten what the concept of transit was, why it was created, and it was created to provide access and mobility and equity. So if we can change the mindset at US DOT FTA to begin thinking about innovative transit solutions, regardless of fixed route, regardless of fixed schedule, those are the things that FTA defines transit as. The minute you do that, then you can open up the opportunity across the sector. Millicent said a couple of numbers, I don't know if you guys caught it. $125 million worth of public investment compared to $1.2, $1.4 billion worth of private investment. In finance, that's a 90-10 gearing ratio. 90-10, 90% private sector investment, which is private equity, people like us coming to the table to really pumping money into the infrastructure. It could be everything from mixed-use development, it could be additional public infrastructure, But private entities are willing to come in and put that kind of investment dollars into communities when they recognize that there is political leadership and there is commitment, and things won't change election cycle to election cycle, in order to be able to, again, go back and deliver a solution that transit was meant to be at its inception. Can these things work? Absolutely, they can work. I mean, we're working with Jeral and his team in Texas, working with different cities and trying to see if, in fact, we can make something like that happen. Jeral came back from overseas not too long ago. As a matter of fact, I think you flew in here hours ago, right? Yeah, and so everywhere else around the globe, I think people are beginning to look at innovative transit system, aerial gondolas being one of them, and there are other modes that can, I mean, there are eVTOLs outside that people talk about. So I think the concept is simple, right? The idea is, let's look at what we are intending to accomplish. Let's see if, in fact, we could change the mindset from these systems being limited application, novelties, ski hills, Disney World type concepts into a real transit solution. And then maybe we can change hearts and minds in Washington to allow federal funding to be used for these types of systems, not only for initial CapEx, but also for OpEx and state of good repair.
Well, Jeral, we certainly appreciate all your efforts to get here this morning and your travel plan. But given your experience in New Zealand, these conversations you're having here in the U.S., who do you think, in terms of cities across the U.S., that this would be an applicable solution for them? What type of fertile ground
I think
are we looking for?
the common thread is kind of what I said earlier, but they have a problem and no other good solution. But specifically, it's been mostly the high-growth cities. Miami's, southern Florida in general, Texas, the places where, there's been an undercurrent of all of these conversations about a real estate aspect. And so it's pretty
Land
clear
use.
in Portland, overall land use, more development. And so it's those places that are running up against some development limits, they're running up against traffic limits, and everybody knows the future's going to get worse for traffic. And they're kind of running out of options. And so that's the kind of places, the high growth areas.
Right. We're in an industry that started with a 20-year long-range transportation plans, and now everybody wants a 5-minute plan. So I think, that speed to delivery, certainly in the projects that I've been involved with, the policymakers want to see a project that can be delivered within their terms. And that certainly helps get that momentum going.
It's by focusing first on the private sector, it hits us even worse, although it makes a better product, is that a developer who says it can take me 4 years to build my development, if we take 6 years to build our system, they would have to build something that can work without it for 2 years. So we have to have a delivery schedule that matches that. So these small segments, these small pieces that you can bite off and chew easily and get delivered in a 4-year cycle is what we have to do for the private sector, which is going to pay big dividends in the public sector when 20-year plans we now know they were never really that real to begin with.
I just wanted to add one thing based on what Sia said that's really, really important, at least as it applies in our situation, and that is disadvantaged communities. We are actually located in an area that scores under what's called Cal EnviroScreen 3.0, which is kind of an assessment of the various socioeconomic and environmental factors in a community. These are the highest scoring communities, meaning the most impacted communities in the state of California. Actually, the communities that we're serving have half the countywide median income range. These communities that we're serving have the highest incidence of a household without access to a vehicle. So one of the lessons that, and what Sia was talking about in terms of how do you change hearts and minds, actually I would argue that the way in which you do that is you roll up your sleeves and work with the community and create those local partnerships. I would add one more thing. When we went through Metro, we ended up with our county supervisor who represents this area putting on a series of, quote, conditions onto the certification of our environmental document. As opposed to many projects which would get up and oppose those, we actually embrace those. because it shifts the whole notion of transportation as just transportation and instead focuses on community building. And the notion that a project can be a catalyst for community building and community revitalization in a positive, equitable fashion is critically important. And I would argue that's the way that you start sending the message from the bottom up.
David, by the way, compliments on your gondola tie.
Thank you.
We couldn't let that go unnoticed. So we're going to leave a little time here for questions, but Sia, do you see anything happening at the federal level with the FTA where there's the
I really
opportunities
do.
to have these discussions?
Absolutely, I really do. I think for the first time in a long time, US DOT, especially through FTA and through Build America Bureau, are beginning to change some applications with respect to transit-oriented development. Yesterday, we heard from Morteza Farajian, who's the head of Build America Bureau. We've heard this morning from Mike Inabinet of HNTB at the keynote session about applications where the feds are actually willing to use some of the current dollars in the variety of different federal programs to encourage community development through application of innovative transportation solutions. You know, the application of allowing TIFIA funding for TODs is a game changer. The application of TIFIA for transforming empty office buildings into attainable housing is a game changer. These are the types of things that were only done by private development and private equity dollars. But if the feds are willing to step up and provide grants like that to actually change communities from the bottom up, I could very easily see transportation solutions as a part of that integrated redevelopment program that would ultimately change things. Now, you know, IIJA will be done in a year and a half, starting literally, I'm going from here to Washington to start working on the next authorization or reauthorization. But there isn't anybody in Washington that believes we're not going to have at least another series of 5, 6, 7 different continuing resolutions, CRs as they're known in DC. But yeah, I mean, transportation planning is, as we've talked about, is a very long and arduous process. Community development, you know, I've always believed that we, for some strange reason, somewhere along the line decided that land use planning, community development, and transportation are 3 different silos that don't need to talk to one another. But if you go back to NEPA and you look at what CEQA does, that is essential. They have to be thought through together. They have to be applied together. And again, there are mechanisms to allow for that to happen. So am I hopeful? Absolutely. You know, we saw some great movement through IIJA and through some of the other federally funded programs that came about the past couple of years. Can we continue those in the future? I think we can, and you know, it really depends on the local community leadership and continued pressure on our elected officials in Washington to help us to get to where we need to be. Because unless we push for it, it will never happen.
Fantastic. This is wonderful information. I'm very excited about the future, but I want to see if anybody has any questions here in the audience. Winsome.
Hey, so this is not a question so much as an observation. So we talk about having to go overseas to see examples of gondolas and aerial tramways. We've had a long-standing commuter service in New York City connecting Roosevelt Island over the East River to the mainland, before there was a 2nd Avenue subway. And I lived there for 4 years, and I worked at United Nations, and that was my commute. And then I walked a few blocks. And I can tell you that even in the severest snowstorms, they still operated. It was only when it was gale force winds that they shut down the operation. And so it's the things that we don't talk about, that we're not aware of, but we have our examples right here. And without that tram, there is no way Roosevelt Island could have been a successful mixed-use, high-density residential community. And I lived it. That's how I got to work. I think in IIJA, I think there's some really good potential in the Reconnecting Communities program, for example, where we're trying to correct the ills of the past. This may very well be the fastest and most cost-effective transportation and mobility solution. So there's a lot of stuff here that we can work on around the country and make our existing transportation bill work for us. So reauthorization is the best thing I think that could happen to us as a nation. Thank you.
Totally agree. Thanks.
Fantastic.
Yeah, there's a funny note for any transportation planners in the audience. Your models are built around minimizing a negative. The cost and time of commute, the models are based to do that. You take something that's a positive, that people are choosing to spend money to do optionally, it's a positive factor, and it throws off all the models. So be ready for infinite demand if you let your models run wild, because it is the rare transportation mode that people choose to take.
Fantastic. I think this is so applicable in so many locations and definitely the different permutations that we discussed here. So very excited about the future. And each one of you want to give some closing thoughts?
Thank you for the opportunity to share on this panel. I do think it's important for us to, as we think about innovation, as we think about moving our cities forward, that we do remind ourselves that right, wrong, or indifferent, transportation has been just as divisive as it has been used for connection. And one of the ways that I talk about transportation is that I view it through the lens of freedom. Parks are fun, transportation means freedom, it means access. And if we're able to use the tools that we have, the collective strengths and energies that we have as communities to come up with meaningful solutions and seriously consider them instead of falling back on what's easy, what we've done, what we know, we can move our communities forward in meaningful ways. Your comments around reconnecting, we got a $450 million grant to reconnect a community in Portland, and I was thinking as I was looking at the pictures, especially Swyft's pictures or the video, wow, wouldn't that be great? Because what that community needs the most is a connection or a reconnection. So excited about the future of what we are able to do or what we can do. And I always have in the back of my mind that we have to demystify transportation and we have to remove the exclusivity of it and the access to it so that folks can see these things as benefits and opportunities for themselves as individuals and their communities at large.
Joe?
What I live for in this field, and I just came from a long tour of many countries, is the light bulb moments I see where people have a mental picture of what a gondola can do and what it can't. And then we get there, talk to them, and there's that moment when they flip. And suddenly, like, oh, if we could remove some of these limitations of the old way and come up with something new, first it's I can solve a transportation problem, and then it's how it affects my community and all the other things I can do for it. And suddenly they're leading the conversation, not me. That's what I'm seeing, and that the number of places that it works for it's a different use case every time, but that light bulb moment when someone sees, here's a mode that actually can solve a real problem my community has, that's what I live for.
David?
Thanks. So I think my closing thought, I have two. My closing thought is really that we're here at CoMotion and it's about integrating innovation. And I don't want to forget to underscore the criticality of zero emission in the transport space and getting there, because we're 40% of transportation is 40% of emissions. That's a huge number. And so the ability to actually not just this technology, not just this application, which is an old technology actually that's got a renaissance going on. But the reality is all of these kinds of things, we have to do it all. And so that would be my kind of big picture closing thought. And then my final thought is Sia's got amazing shoes. They're beautiful shoes.
Nice socks. Sia.
I'm speechless. Well, yeah, One very quick comment. I think I agree with everything that's been said here with respect to innovation in land use planning, innovation and application of transportation solutions. As a private equity investor, developer, operator of public infrastructure, what I'm here to tell you is that once we get these things done, there is so much private equity available to invest, not only in the public infrastructure, but also in the ancillary mixed-use private infrastructure that needs to be done to rebuild our communities, to make the connections happen, and so on and so forth. So if we get the seed money from the feds, I guarantee you there'll be private equity people beating each other over the head to try to get to the front of the line.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank all of you. You put a lot of work into developing these projects and getting us here. So thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for that great panel. We'd like to remind everyone we've got a workshop going on over in the other room, and we will have great presentations here for our challenge coming up shortly. So thank you all for joining us. We'll be back to programming in just a moment.
But I'm going to plug this in. We're going to get started with round 2 of the startup presentations in just a moment. If you would like to take your seats.
Yes, we have a real one.
I still prefer using my update.
I don't think it's possible.
Can we just upload here from here? It's should be USB.
Yeah,
Okay, why don't you just go ahead?
so we'll use this one.
Okay. Do you have 1 minute? Because there's a one. I just add one video here, which is I think is important one. I shouldn't have it here.
Okay, but I don't, yeah. In minutes, in a few minutes. No. 3, 5.
3 to 5
Yeah.
minutes. I will just turn it on and leave it on then.
Well, no, we're not going to use those. It's just here.
Also, yes.
Yeah, and then there will be a question and answer with the audience. Yeah, okay.
So are you able to open it?
I don't know because this is not my computer. So,
If anything,
do you use Windows?
Yeah. it is this one. It is this CoMotion. Yeah, if you can just, yes.
Hey, Vivian.
Okay.
Great.
So I will unplug this. It's this one. If you can you open it? See the work? Yes. Good, good.
There's going to be multiple speakers. They come up. No. Yeah. If they do, I'll hand it to them.
Okay. Either way, that comes to you.
Sure. Okay. Thanks.
You know how to turn it on, right?
No, these mics are good. Yeah.
I was just saying because you work.
Great. Thanks for joining. We're just going to get started in one moment. We're missing the judges. Great. Thanks so much for day 2 of the startup pitches of CoMotion Miami 2024. We have 3 great presentations today, one by Codename E-lixr, one by CoFlow Jet Lift, and one by Hextronics. I'm really looking forward to these and hearing who we choose as the winner. Thanks again for our amazing judges who are coming from all over the world to be here to learn about these new startups. Special thanks to Jennifer Dungs, the Global Head of Mobility from EIT Innovation Energy, who just finished her panel and sprinted on over. Thanks a lot, Jennifer. Gabriel Scheer, the Senior Director of Innovation for Elemental Accelerator. Thanks for being here. Nicholas DeAndre, last year's winner, CEO and co-founder of Grid Matrix. Jonathan Kilman, Chairman and CEO of Converge Public Strategies. Thanks for being here, Jonathan. And Pedro Santos, the Executive Director of Emerging Technologies of Miami-Dade College right here. It's an amazing venue. Thanks for being here again. I won't take up too much of your time. I'll hand it over to Sam, who's going to be presenting Codename E-lixr. Thanks, Sam.
All right, are we set up here? All right, hi everyone. My name is Sam Payrovi. I am the co-founder and CEO of Codename E-lixr. This is a mission to develop, decarbonize, and unify a nationwide waterborne passenger transport system, which would start right here in Miami-Dade County, expand up through Florida, and then eventually into the rest of the states. So we all live near Biscayne Bay, or those that are here at least. One of the big problems we face is transport across Biscayne Bay. Causeways, bridges, tunnels are just not enough to get people across these large bodies of water. And so road transport is extremely insufficient. So boats would be the obvious answer, but the problem is fuel is very expensive. It's 50% more expensive out on the water than it is on land. And boats are extremely inefficient. At best, a small boat gets about 1 mile a gallon. So imagine what a transport boat gets. Even if you solve that challenge, you now have fuel leaving a tailpipe, and it doesn't go up into the atmosphere. It hits the water, and it sticks right there and goes directly into the bay. So that's all a problem. So we had been working on this for a while because of another business that we own, and we came up with a solution for ourselves that we realized is a solution to multimodal transport across these large bodies of water, and that is Codename E-lixr. And we believe that when you build the correct electric vessel and the right experience, it will drive full-scale adoption of waterborne transport in the US. So E-lixr is a 22 to 40 passenger vessel all electric. It has autonomy assist. And one important piece of it, for those that ride the Bright Line, is the premium experience really does help to get people out of their cars and into multimodal transport. And so what does E-lixr do? Well, two services. First, we develop an on-demand water taxi service. We support waterfront hospitality, marinas, and not only do we support people who just want to get out, but also people who want to get to work in a different way and avoid traffic. But then as we begin to scale up and procure more vessels, we can actually build a full-scale scheduled ferry service. So this is what you know of normal transport: optimized timetables, predefined routes, and reliable connections. And the nice thing is, on water, you don't have traffic, so you don't have the risk of your 20-minute commute becoming an hour all of a sudden. It's pretty much going to be within 5 minutes of 20 minutes. We're already working with multiple agencies throughout Miami-Dade County, and we also believe that when you get the cost reduction from fuel down to electricity cost, counties, cities, and other agencies will actually subsidize the differential. That brings the cost down, makes the ridership work. But I mentioned we have two services. And so how do we layer those two services from one set of vessels? If you look at this timetable, you'll see that in the morning, if we have 20 vessels, we shift more of them over to the scheduled ferry. And also we do that for the late afternoon rush as well. In the non-peak hours, we shift them off into the on-demand service. There's another big thing going on here, which is size of vessel. Most ferry systems always operate on vessels that are between 100 to 150 people. When you do that, at peak times, great, you got a full vessel. When you're off-peak, you're about 95% empty, and all you're doing is pushing a massive hunk of metal across water. When you move to electric, that just won't work. And we all want to move to electric or hydrogen, but it has to be done with smaller vessels to get this efficiency. When people do get to shore, where do they go? Normally, with a waterborne transport system, people only care about the immediate walking distance. We're actually partnering with Freebie, and with a last mile service provided by Freebie, our people will get into a car directly at the marina and go to exactly where they want to get out to. So we go from walking distance service area to a 3-mile extended service area. Now, we're going to receive the first E-lixr in mid-2025, but we can't wait until then. So we're going to be launching a beta service in the next few months here on some traditional fuel vessels just to test and experiment. We'll launch 2 cross-bay routes, what you see here, and then eventually these will become a clockwise and a counterclockwise circulator. But the long-term game here is to eventually partner with other vessel types. We don't just want to be a manufacturer, we really want to be an operator of a nationwide transport system. So our phase 2 will bring in a larger vessel that can carry more people and go county to county. Our phase 3 aims to be a regional transport, and it could be a Regent craft, which gets people from Miami to Tampa and Jacksonville. I mentioned autonomy earlier. Coast Guard's not ready. They're not going to be ready for 3 years just to even get to autonomy assist, or 5 years to get to autonomy. What we're integrating autonomy for is to capture a lot of data. We run 72,000 miles per year on a single vessel. But besides helping Coast Guard learn about autonomy in that process, we will actually have situational awareness. This is already a slow-speed vessel at 12 to 15 knots, so we can see exactly what's out there. We don't really have safety risks, but you can't always see what's under the water. And autonomy can. Forward-looking sonar tapped into autonomy will really help us make sure we are safe for all marine wildlife, which is extremely important here in Florida, as well as any other underwater obstacles. I'm going to skip this slide because we're short on time, but there are 2 very important long-term outcomes here. I mentioned E-lixr is not the only vessel we need to build this system. We actually need 3 different vessels. So we are proposing to build an all-electric e-boat shipyard down here in South Florida, create a lot of jobs, bring shipbuilding back here, bring the component suppliers in to support that, and then have at least four all-electric brands build out of that. We already have 2 of them. We think we know who the 3rd is, and we think we know who the 4th is. But for E-lixrs to operate, we need marina DC charging. The max you can get on a boat with 200, 300, 400 kilowatt hours of batteries is about 40 to 50 miles. We need to run 200 miles in a single day, and so we need marina DC chargers. So we've been speaking with Florida Power and Light, who will be installing those chargers for us. And what we've also decided to do is instead of installing 1 charger, we'll install 2. Why? Because the second one becomes publicly accessible. And when you do that, recreational boaters will get over their range anxiety and switch to recreational electric boating as well. And that's a sea change because electric boating is drastically a better experience than traditional ice engines. We finished our designs earlier this year. We're now in engineering and going into Coast Guard discussions. Our first vessel starts getting built Q3 of this year into Q2 of next year. Our goal is to build 12 vessels in 26 and 24 vessels in 27, and that's about the time we would get the shipyard open down here. The first wave will get built up in Maine. We have actually spent a lot of the last 6 months putting together a world-class team of propulsion integrators, naval architects, and shipbuilders. These are literally some of the biggest names in shipbuilding. We realized we had to go this third-party route to get the best vessel built that was an institutional product that could work correctly on day one. So that's what we're building. Lastly, our management team. I myself spent 14 years in investment banking. I grew up boating. I built an electric boat when I was 6 in a milk carton. I'm still very proud of that. My co-founder, Natalie, is former LVMH. She's luxury marketing and branding. She's the one who's gonna make sure it's that experience that gets people out of their cars. Aaron Leatherwood is former Coast Guard down here at Sector Miami. He was also the former CEO of RMK Merrill Stevens and built that shipyard. He's the guy who put the RMK in front of Merrill Stevens. That's the one you see when you drive over the river. Hardin Bethea is our maritime finance expert. That's all he's done for 20 years. And we have many other freelancers and partners that work with us, but we believe we are going to get these boats in water and build a waterborne transport system that scales through Florida and nationwide. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam. We have 2 minutes for questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Quick question about price points. You mentioned that you wanted to go big. What do you think would be the correct to start the price point for, I live in Miami Beach and I wanted to come to this campus and I wanted to use your services. What do you think would be the ideal price point for me to convert on, instead of driving my Tesla, just taking that boat?
Yeah, so there's a two-part price point because it's two different services. The first on-demand service, if you are sharing that, so we will work to do almost like what Uber does with Uber Share. If you're sharing that, that can get down to $20 to $30 for your group, and that's the same price as a Uber to get across the bay, right? When we get into the public scheduled service, our goal is to be under $10. If the county or the city or any other agency subsidize that electricity cost, we can actually get that under 7.5 for Cross Bay.
So, quick question that's broad though. Impressive team, impressive vision, and also taking on a whole lot. So how much have you raised? How do you plan to raise the amount you need to go build a shipyard and also do the charging side and also be an operator of a fleet of boats, which is very different sets of skills and capital costs?
Yeah, great question. There's two parts to what's going on. We actually own and operate another business which is buying the first 3 vessels. That's how we came into this. Those 3 vessels are going to bring in $3 million of gross revenue into this business, right? We're raising $1.5 million right now. We have our first few checks committed. We're working to accelerate that and raise the rest of it. I don't need all of it on day one. I need it incrementally over the next 9 to 12 months. The shipyard, there is actually some very good debt financing for the shipyard. One of the reasons we're bringing in the component suppliers is they're going to subsidize that, right? So every one of those component suppliers wants to be the choice engine or the choice battery, so they'll help subsidize it. We believe we're going to get the brands who come in to help subsidize that shipyard too. So we don't think that's going to be more than $3 million. If we went at it ourselves, it's probably $15 million, but we think it's going to be under $3 million. The chargers cost a little over $100,000 per charger. FPL will finance those. And when they finance that on a 10-year financing, it brings our total cost of charging down from $40,000 down to about $18,000. That's a substantial savings, and the primary reason is instead of paying the utility rate plus the markup to cover the cost of the charger, we told FPL we'll pay for the charger, we're going to pay the utility rate itself. There's some other things you can do, use batteries shoreside and charge those overnight. Your utility rate drops from 15 cents down to under 10, get substantial more savings. So, but it is I mean, ultimately, if you really look at this project, we're not trying to just build a boat brand or a service. We're ultimately building an industry, right? The goal is to make South Florida not just the capital of capital, but the capital of electric boating or at least that's what we want to do.
What's the cost per vessel?
So the cost per vessel is still TBD. We know the first 3 vessels are going to cost somewhere around $1.25 million each. That's right. When you compare that to a larger vessel, like a 150-person high-speed foiling ferry, those you're looking at $12 to $15 million. So this is 22 to 40. It's actually 22 seated. We can have an additional 18 standing. So, you know, drastically cost-wise per person, not only are we more efficient from an operational perspective, but also from a vessel perspective. What we have realized over the last 3 months is that we don't want to sell the vessels. We will in very unique cases. Some island resort wants to buy one in a place we don't want to operate the service. But our goal is to ultimately become a transport company. My view on it is that I don't want to build a manufacturing business. I want to build a transport company which then can tap into an Uber or a Lyft and truly become multimodal with their platforms.
Okay,
All right. Thank you, guys.
Okay, go ahead. No, it's okay.
Do we have one more?
I was going to ask 2 questions. One, I was going to say this almost looks like a Tesla on the water to me. And my question was, you know, who are your competitors? Are you really the only one who's building a small, you know, energy efficient ferry, basically? The second one is, usually electric cars are more expensive, so I'm surprised to hear that this is less expensive than maybe a comparable other option. So can you talk about where you're realizing those cost efficiencies?
Yeah, I didn't catch your first question. If you can just repeat.
I said, are you really the only one who's building a small electrified ferry, basically? And if you're not, who else is, and what would stop another company from buying that boat and then running, let's say, a competing service?
Got it. In terms of IP and creating a moat, there's one very important thing here, which is the Jones Act of 1920. To have a commercial vessel in U.S. waters operating and carrying passengers, that vessel has to be built in the U.S. Okay? There's one tiny, tiny workaround, but it's not a workaround you could do and build a scalable business. There are about 20 electric boat brands in the world. 3 to 4 of them are here in the U.S. The other 16 are in Europe and other places. The only other 2 companies building something that could scale and become a commercial transport system are both in Europe. Okay? Artemis, I would say, is the 3rd one that could be there. But those are all much larger vessels, and they're not planning to come to the U.S. So that really leaves us. We have almost cornered that market for now, and we don't know anybody in the U.S. building a true commercial passenger transport vessel that's electric in the U.S. So that has a lot to do with our moat. In terms of the price point, well, you know, I think Natalie would tell you I'm exceptionally good at getting costs down on things. A lot of that is partially relationship building and negotiation. I spent 14 years on Wall Street, so I know when I'm getting a very expensive price and how to kind of like work with that or go to another supplier. The other thing to note is when we say the first 3 vessels are going to be at $1.25 million, our next vessels are going to actually drop under $1 million, which is very important. So that's for a small price of a very nice fishing boat, you're going to get a commercial luxury all-electric boat. We're not adding margin to that, and the primary reason is that because we're basically taking the vessels on ourselves because we want to run the transport system. The money is not in the manufacturing, it's in the transport. So when you come at it as a startup founder and you're trying to say, I want to build a business that's going to scale and exit, ultimately I have a better shot of selling a transport system to an Uber for a unicorn type exit rather than selling a manufacturing business with 20% margins. I hope that answered that.
Can you define what do you mean by like, oh, no, okay.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you. Great presentation. Next, we have Gecheng from CoFlow Jet Lift. Great.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gecheng Zha. I'm the CEO of CoFlow Jet. I'm also a professor at the University of Miami. So today I will present the 2nd generation eVTOL. We're going to fly the best on Earth. We will be the only one fly on Mars. We just selected by NASA to potentially fly on Mars. So, well, when we talk about 2nd generation, so first let's review what is the 1st generation. All the current eVTOL is the so-called 1st generation. It's categorized by NASA. So it means their propellers all have to facing upward, like helicopter to take off in the landing, and then they have to do the transition to cruise. This is actually quite complex, and also they have the lifting plus system, which is all this is only used for hover, but have to carry for the whole mission. So it's not very efficient. It's draggy and heavy. So our solution is using CoFlow Jet, which we embedded the microcompressors inside the airfoil, stuck in air near the trailing edge, pressurized eject near the leading edge. This enormously changed the performance. We are funded by DARPA, NASA, and various agencies. Here's the testing. You can see that the baseline lift coefficient, maximum lift is 1.4. We get 9. The baseline has a positive drag. We got a very large negative drag, which is a thrust. So the second generation we are developing is that the propeller will be always fixed in the forward position, like cruise. For hover, we basically using the flap to turn the flow downward from the propeller. So only CoFlow Jet flap is able to turn the flow 90 degrees. So it's much simpler, more quiet, and higher efficiency, which translates to longer range. So here is an animation showing the concept. You can see that it's ready to go up, flap down. Propeller is always fixed in the forward position. So up, and we retract flap, going to cruise. When we're coming back, you can see that ready to go down, we will put the flap down and very smoothly landing. The transition will be much smooth. So we did testing with the NASA. It's funded. You can see the propellers here. The flow, the smoke shows it turns 90 degrees very well. Only CoFlow Jet can do this. Also, this is Joby's simulation. So the downwash will interact with the fuselage and the wing, generate large broadband noise. For us, our flow is all attached, so we don't. Our broadband noise will be very, very low. We also come inherent anti-icing system because we have air. Small aircraft in general have no anti-icing system. So if you want to fly in Canada or Denmark in the winter, you'd better just park your aircraft. So we also naturally combine stall and VTOL together. What does stall means? What does stall means? Stall means short takeoff landing. So this for VTOL, we just deflect the flap larger. For stall, we deflect smaller. So it's actually, once we have a runway, using stall actually save a lot of energy. So developing the eVTOL in general need a longer period and more funding. So at the same time, for quick revenue generation, we want to do the empennage first, which is the control surface of the aircraft. We are able to reduce the, for example, Boeing 787, the empennage, the size by half. And then what's the benefit of that? We save fuel like 13%. And it means for each aircraft, 787, we can save 4.5 million fuel cost per year. So what does that mean? We did, for FedEx, they have 700 million aircraft fleets. A year, we will save them $500 million. We are actually in discussion with the FedEx now. So, so in general, we have two business. This one will be quicker. In 2 years, we want to certify, generate revenue in 3 years. This one, we are looking at the 5 years certification. So how big, just talking about the empennage business, how big it is. So we expect in 10 years, our revenue could $1.4 billion. That's just for empennage only. The overall market is very, very large. We are talking about $1 trillion. So our business model is licensing and manufacturing and the sales. So we are asking for $1.5 million for pre-seed now. So overall, here's the potential customers and competitors, which we treat them as partners. So we already have 19 patents already issued. Here's our team. So myself there, as I said, I'm a professor too, and Dr. Ren, he's there, he's our CTO sitting there. Hagen, the VP, and the rest advisors. Don is a recently retired Boeing engineer. So the same core technology will have three verticals: aerospace, wind energy, and marine propulsion. So we really want to have the impact of environment for clean energy and emission reduction, and bring the social impact for overall to benefit the labor force development in South Florida. So that's all. And as I said, we are very proud we may fly one day on Mars. Thank you.
I have the mic. I'll start just because I have the mic, but then I'll pass it down. Great presentation, thank you. I have a question. So I'm not an expert at this space, but I know that for design changes of commercial aircraft, very expensive regulatory process. That's why Boeing is still making the 787-9, because they first came out within the 60s, and there's, it just basically has not changed since then. What's involved, and how do you plan to address that challenge if you want to actually change the, let's say, tail flap of a commercial airline?
Well, I think the very important is the effect of the fuel reduction, the benefit to the airline and to customers. Just think about the winglet. You probably see the winglet. The idea has been there for long time, but you see almost every airplane implement that. How much percentage of fuel reduction? That has to be long range. You can maximum save 4%. Long range means from LA to China. If you from here to Boston, you hardly reduce any fuel consumption. For ours, we reduce fuel consumption as long as you fly, and also small to large aircraft. In other words, there's a very big incentive for airline want to go there. Think about FedEx, $500 million saving a year. You just cannot ignore that.
Thank you.
So, great presentation. Quick question. You talk about the winglet. What about the plane, the actual plane? Are you planning to manufacture the plane as well, or just the winglet?
We can do retrofit. Well, actually, most of the winglet today is retrofit. There's several companies doing that. So this business model will work. Yes. And certainly we will work with manufacturing for the new airplane design too.
My question went in the same direction. So with the certification that you're doing that takes 2 years?
We will finish the prototype and the testing, and in year 3 we'll start certification.
Certification.
Yeah.
But do you need a different certification for when you retrofit all the airplanes? And then for that, how complex is it? So if you retrofit this kind of plane, then do you need another certification when you retrofit another size or type of plane? Like, can you?
Yeah, I think different type, you probably need a certification. But in general, if we satisfy the rule, it could be applied to many aircraft.
Seems like you have some big potential with just licensing alone. Why do the extra step of building the eVTOL?
Licensing is good enough, right? But we want to be more ambitious. If you Tesla just do licensing, they cannot be the big 3 today. So we do want to do licensing, but we also want to be trying to play a big role.
What's the earliest time frame where you could bring this to market for any type of aircraft?
I'm sorry?
What's the earliest time frame that you could bring this to market for any aircraft?
For the empennage, we can bring to in 3 years. So
what about for vessels, for marine
for
vessels?
For eVTOL, we are thinking in 5 to 6 years.
In the marine vessel?
Marine vessel could be in 2 years. It's much easier and very, very high impact. Marine is very high, big polluters. 90% of the goods is shipped by marine.
And then to round out our presentations for the day and also for CoMotion, we have Kurt from Hextronics. Welcome, Kurt.
Thank you, Dan.
You can choose.
I can just, stay right here. That's fine. Let's see, which side am I taking it?
Just,
Bingo. Okay, sweet. All right. Good morning. I'm Curtis Lary. I'm the founder, CEO, and engineer of Hextronics. We started Hextronics back in the later time of 2020 and have been growing right here in Miami, Florida. I love being at CoMotion. It always feels like we're leaving a mark on the future every time we're here. And there's no better way to do it than touch a little bit on the beginnings of aerial mobility. I know this is a classic picture, the Model B from the Wright brothers, but it really proved a time when flight was repeatable, and it always needed to be done with some of the bravest people in the game that were the test pilots. But now we're flying people across the planet, thousands every single day, and we don't really think much of it when we're streaming our favorite series when we fly over to Europe or something. And then the stage where CoMotion seems to be headed is with completely automatic flight and vertiports. I always love this vision. It's something that's definitely a long ways away, but we're kind of inching closer and closer and closer with every small innovation. And so right now we're smack dab in between the past and the future, and really how we're going to obtain something that looks like as sci-fi-esque as this is with something on the lines of urban beyond visual line of sight flight. So this is a little sketch I did in my apartment when we first started Hextronics, and it's what I was able to convince some of the engineers to come work with me to build our systems. And so urban beyond visual line of sight flight is really the ability to fly a drone automatically in order to solve problems in an urban environment. And to do this, there's a wide variety of service providers and software developers that are all making really cutting-edge flight control capabilities, bringing value to a wide variety of industries. And so when we first got started, we called quite a few of these groups, trying to see what their problems were, and they all said, hey, we make really cool drone automatic flight software, but it's only as automatic as the guy that has to go out to the field and swap its battery. And so this happened to be quite a recurring problem that many of these automated drone providers and creators and builders were coming up to, and I feel like it's most portrayed by Baby Yoda in this sense, where everyone's excited to be able to fly drones automatically from anywhere in the world, but you always do need a pilot there on site to launch them and refuel them. And so that's when Hextronics came into being. This is our first product, the Global. It's right there, mobile on Miami Beach, deployed actually for first response on the beach to, say, respond to anybody that might get lost out at sea. But so the Hextronics Global was our first system. It's since scaled way beyond my initial imagination, and it works simply with a remote operator on their desktop. And then a Nest on site. This is another one of our products. This is the Atlas. And then the operator programs missions, has them preset to capture critical data, or simply launches the drone to fly to a particular point at any given time. And so this kind of full combination enables an operator to command and control countless amounts of drones from one single place instead of needing a pilot at every location. And so the model that we've started off with and what we've seen the most success with is enabling the entire enchilada or the whole enchilada mindset. Hextronics got its early beginnings from solving the critical layer of having a docking station for a wide variety of commercial drones so that some of the industry-leading drones that people are already using and building on today can now be automated with Hextronics. And so we've been able to see this scale from across the world. We're deployed in over 25 countries with just about 200 units in the field to date. This is starting just from my garage basically in 2020, and now we've scaled to really understand that the entire market size of just these docking stations is up to 17 billion today, but we do see extreme amount of growth in the next decade. And from this, really, we've come to realize that we're the team to do it because we're just a team of hardcore engineers. They like to stay up all night building some absolutely rock star systems. Right here in South Florida, I'm the only one here today, so I might need someone to snap a picture of me so we can put it on LinkedIn. Thank you. Because most of my team's back home building our drone stations while I'm having fun here talking to you guys. And a lot of what we've learned is that it's actually kind of hard to make these automatic drone stations be able to be deployed in a wide variety of environments across the planet. And so, yeah, hardware is hard, but being simple and powerful is really where we get, where we really provide the most value for our customers. So these are our 3 flagship products to date: the Global, the Atlas, and the Universal. The Global worked for one of the most widespread drones, the Mavic 2 by DJI. The Atlas works for the M300, another very powerful drone, and then the Universal works for a wide variety of drones made abroad as well as locally in the US. And in order to make all of these things, we had to make an extremely compact HVAC system and integrated circuits and really complex but simple electromechanical systems. And in doing all of this, we've been able to actually have industry lead in our time to refuel with battery swapping. Battery swapping is probably the most powerful capability that a docking station can have because it enables the maximum amount of utility from the aircraft. And it's extremely applicable to a few case studies that we currently have deployed. So drone as a first responder enables a drone to be on the scene of a 911 call within 90 seconds. The operator gets a call for the emergency, address is sent to the nest, and then the drone is deployed and on the scene, like I said, in 90 seconds, giving first responders an immediate eye on what's going on. Currently, we have deployments throughout the western United States, as well as parts of Canada, as well as roughly 5 other countries that are focused primarily on drone as a first responder. And then another use case that is actually quite significant in a variety of different industries is one that's we're spearheading with one of the largest railway providers here in the US, where it's really analyzing some critical components at switch yards. That's mandated that inspection to be done by personnel to inspect tracks many times per week, which takes hours and hours on end, of which they're able to now outsource that visual inspection to an automatic drone station. Don't hold this against me, but they actually do use AI and machine learning to analyze the railway tracks to see which one is actually, if there's a track that's stuck in one certain position, the train can like fall over, and it's a huge nightmare. And in both of these cases, drone is a first responder, where previously they'd use a helicopter or a railway inspection where they would use personnel to go travel the tracks. Hextronics is 10 times more cost effective and enables for an extreme amount of scale to every single one of these sites and locations that these organizations have across the planet. And so from this growth, just starting basically beginning of 21, late 2020, we've doubled our revenue. Our total revenue, we doubled it in 2023, and that's because we're extremely customer obsessed, and we continue to come out with products that people want, buy, and deploy in a variety of different industries. And what's next is really why I'm here and why I'm excited to talk to everybody, not just the judges, because everything that we're talking about with mobility data spec, that's now an ability to kind of centralize all different data inputs to a city to give a more cohesive image for many of the decision makers and solution providers. I think that's where drones can start to play an extremely critical role, where we should really think about how we can start deploying these for all of these variety of industries, because the technology is going to be there for the drone as a first responder, so you might as well start sending up, hey, I need this intersection inspected, I need to have a 3D model of this new construction project, I want to see what's going on at the beach today, thinking about from a wide variety of different departments that can now have an input to this deployed technology. And that's why I feel like CoMotion's driving the future, and that's why I feel like Hextronics is the best provider of automatic drones on the planet. Thank you.
So thank you for the presentation. Quick question. You mentioned about hardware. So you are creating the docks. What about the software? Who is doing the software? Are you guys doing the coding on the
Yeah, so we have an open API. In our drone-in-a-box systems, you can simply call take off the drone, swap the battery, turn on the drone, things like this. And then the solution providers and software developers that focus on these particular industries need our hardware to be able to deploy their software. So we do have a base layer API that's kind of like a platform for these developers to now build their solutions upon.
So I want to make sure I clarify. You're doing the drone boxes or the docks that are agnostic to the drone, but you're also developing drones that are being used in the use cases you described?
So we started off enabling the whole enchilada, and we're extremely customer obsessed. So we're focused on deploying the entire solution for some customers, or providing a single layer that then a solution provider can enable. So there's kind of two parts of the coin, kind of like how I was talking about.
Are you manufacturing drones as well as the dock stations?
Currently, we're manufacturing the docking station for industry-leading commercial drones.
Got it. Okay, that's
You mentioned battery swapping. Is that something that the docking stations do for you, or do you have to have a person there doing that?
Yeah, we have a little robot in the docking station that actually swaps the battery of the drone in 3 minutes.
And that's interoperable across DJI and other brands?
Yeah, we have like it's like kind of a different module for a different drone, so you just swap it out and it works with a different one.
With your product, can you serve different customers with the same landing pad, swapping station, et cetera? And then if so, who's financing the batteries? Because you're going to need to have some extra batteries on stock to allow for a new battery to be swapped all the time.
Sure, yep. So typically the solution provider or the end customer procures the hardware from us, and then we have a recurring kind of a support warranty model. And so it's pretty much a CapEx model for the solution provider or the end customer, or the end customer coordinates with the solution provider, and the solution provider leases that full stack solution to the end customer, and then the end customer just gets the data to make the decisions from at the end of the day.
Just because when I look at this, I think of this as a dual use application. Like, it seems like the military would be a natural consumer for you. And, you know, I'm just gonna go from reading about Ukraine recently, where I think unmanned aerial vehicles used in combat has never been seen on the scale that they're doing it. And I think they're also doing remote piloting as well. So, you know, when it comes to mind for me, this just seems like something the military would love and would pay a lot for and deploy at significant scale. And I'm just wondering how, I know the federal governments are hard to sell to, and the federal government is impossible to sell to for a startup. So I'm just wondering how you're thinking about potentially tapping into that. Because this, I mean, the DOD would, you know, like spends that on Kleenex, like $3 million.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I did core obtainable market, not TAM, because TAM can kind of just be like freaking massive. And at the end of the day, this is what we've started off with, is making that core docking station for commercial drones that exist in the market. So this is the core obtainable market for that exact segment, because there's like you said, it's absolutely insane the amount of like possibilities that are going to be enabled by this technology. And I didn't just want to toss a massive number that I couldn't completely justify.
Understood. How do you think about selling for dual use? Or is that something that you're not interested in for some reason?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely do have dual use applications, capability, and customers right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You can come talk to me. I'm just going to be outside, so yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. That concludes our startup presentations. We will be announcing the winner at the end of the sessions today. Thank you to our judges again. Really great questions. To the audience, thank you for joining. We have 2 more sessions today. I just want to make you aware of them. One in here, which is letting the data lead, I believe. That's at the leaderships. The funding conversation will be in here, and then the numbers conversation in there, elevating safety and efficiency. Oh no. Letting the data tell the story. All right, thank you very much. and enjoy the rest of the CoMotion. We'll see you at the reception.
And ladies and gentlemen, we'll be getting started here in just a few minutes. Give us 4 or 5 minutes, we'll get started once again. Thank you. The data conversation is Jonathan, come over here. He just went to the restroom. I gave him a 5-minute bio break. He hasn't stopped all morning. No, I don't know why this video over IP. Gracias. Since I have my
Speaking with the administrator project
I should be here a little bit later in the afternoon. Probably, I mean, this ends at 2. I'm probably going to.
Ladies and gentlemen, the panel you have all been waiting for. Want to thank you all once again for joining us at CoMotion. Want to really appreciate the fact that both Jonathan and Gabriel are right back at it. We had them very busy this morning. They switched seats. They were down here judging just a moment ago, now on the panel to offer their expertise. Want to thank everyone for joining us at Funding the Frontier. This is a really important conversation. We've got great ideas and innovation. How do we make it happen? Creative capital strategies for new mobility projects. Take it away.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan Kilman. I'm the founder and chairman of a firm called Converge Public Strategies, which is a public affairs firm that represents clients throughout the United States, well, North America, very heavily in the transportation, mobility, and innovation sectors. I also have a venture fund called GoVo Venture Partners, where we invest in companies that are either doing business with government or navigating government regulations as an important success factor to the business. And I say that because I'm wearing both hats today in this conversation. I'm really fascinated with the topic, and I think it's going to be important. I'm actually excited to be up here with the rest of the folks on the panel because they're providing solutions that are critical. I've noticed in my own work, both at Converge as well as at GoVo, a significant shift recently as it relates to where the funding is going in the transportation and mobility sectors. And I want us to have a robust conversation about that today. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to please just do a brief introduction of themselves, and then we'll kick it off. So, Justine?
Good morning, everyone. Okay, there we go. Good morning, everyone. Justine Johnson, Chief Mobility Officer for the state of Michigan. I lead the Office of Future Mobility and Electrification. We have the pleasure in the state of Michigan of thinking about mobility by the lens of land, air, and water, and really thinking about moving people, goods, and information as such. We do have a funding platform within our office called the Michigan Mobility Funding Platform. That funding platform allows us to issue funding to early stage companies that are looking to test and deploy new technologies and services within the state of Michigan. That program has been something that has now, I think, close to 90 companies have gone through this program where they have received funding to, again, think about solutions that are around moving goods, specifically fresh fruits and vegetables to community, EV charging infrastructure, electric off-road vehicle funding for those types of companies, prototype grant funding. So I'll talk a little bit more about all of the different initiatives, but really this funding allows for us to be a government accelerator. It also allows us to be a government futurist, and really we know that we have a number of state departments who would love to tackle some of these issues, especially around new technologies and innovations for mobility. Our office is very unique because we are that one-stop shop for mobility, but also we are the place that we are really augmenting the capacity of traditional government by opening the door for new companies to test and deploy their solutions in real time. So that's something that we're really excited about. I'll go through a number of different projects. I know you'll probably ask questions on that, but I'll turn it over to Gabriel now.
Gabriel, and I'm Senior Director of Innovation at Elemental Accelerator. We are a nonprofit global climate investor, and we are much broader, less focused just on mobility. I get to run the mobility portfolio as well as energy, built environment, and water. So we do invest across all sorts of different companies, all sorts of different scales and sizes. We've done about 160, I think, investments globally, and we have companies based in North America, in Europe, a few in Africa, one in India, and a few in APAC as well. So kind of much broader purview, much broader mandate. Our central thesis, though, is investing in climate tech with a particular interest in traditionally excluded founders, and ideally in projects that deploy in frontline communities. So we're very focused on some of the same project type work that you get to work on, but focused, again, in frontline communities where possible, not always, of course, but where possible. So that's us in a nutshell, and pass it on to you.
Testing. All right, thank you, Gabriel. My name is Alex Busnego. I work for Ford Philanthropy. We are the official corporate foundation of Ford Motor Company. If you saw me pause, it's because we rebranded our name about 1 week ago. We were the Ford Motor Company Fund for about 75 years, and we're only a week into being Ford Philanthropy, so still getting used to that. But we are the corporate foundation of Ford, and my role is leading mobility programs. So we're thinking about for our communities where Ford has a big workforce, meaning our big plant cities, what are ways that we can think about underserved communities who experience transportation insecurity, meaning the intersection of sort of low socioeconomics and also maybe not living near the bus line or not owning a reliable, affordable vehicle. For those folks, for those communities, the need is particularly acute, and we as Ford believe that our core competencies in transportation can be relevant to helping solve needs for those communities. So we make social investments, philanthropic investments, if you will, into a variety of organizations, whether they are nonprofit, that's sort of the more traditional for a foundation. But we're trying to expand the lens a little bit and also attempt some corporate partnerships, invest in social entrepreneurship, and just in general leverage our platform and our name brand to help advocate for better solutions for underserved communities in our plant cities.
Thank you. So just to kick off the conversation, one of the ideas I'd like to bring up is what I've noticed over the last few years is some of the ideas that we're seeing in mobility often have what I would sort of describe as a timing problem, particularly from an investment standpoint, which is, I'm going to use autonomous trucking as an example, where I worked with one autonomous trucking company that was seemingly very successful and having kind of hitting the benchmarks one might expect, but really the runway for it to get to a place where it would be profitable or market accepted or able to operate in a commercial context at scale really didn't meet the timelines appropriate for most of the venture investors that it was speaking with. And I think I've seen this in a sort of recurring form, whether it's in the micromobility segment or others, and maybe that's where philanthropy can come in and fill the gap. Is that where you see your organizations coming in? Do you see this timing issue as part of your mandate?
To a certain extent, yeah, we do see timing being something that's very important. In many ways, specifically within government, we're often looking at how to address problems today. So there's this urgency of fixing needs now, and then there's also this conversation about what will this look like in the next 2 years. So it's finding that right balance. For us, we have a state mobility plan. So as part of that mobility plan, we're really thinking about how we are meeting all of those goals and how we are investing in technologies that will help us to get there. So for example, I mentioned before, charging infrastructure is important for us, and that's a part of one of our goals is 100,000 charging ports, to be put in place by 2030 to support 2 million EVs. Well, that's by 2030, but we still need to do work today. And so I have to think very creatively of how do we attract companies that are investing in charging solutions, whether that is grid-dependent or grid-independent solutions. We also announced the first wireless charging roadway in the nation in Michigan, in Detroit. And so that's, again, another investment that we've made. Autonomous vehicles, our office literally, I want to say 2 weeks ago, we've just put in additional funding to support an autonomous pilot for 1 year in Detroit, and that is going to support, it's a number of partners here, but it's really this true public-private partnership. But the timing is very important because I do have work that I have to think about these goals that are 2030, 2040, 2026, but I can't start the work then, I have to start it now. So it's finding that balance and finding companies that are nicely aligning with the goals that are in that plan as well.
Thank you. And Gabriel, you and I have had some conversations about this topic.
I'll totally throw in on that. I mean, I think that, so first of all, hardware is a lot of what has to happen in climate, right? And we have to make stuff to move bodies. I mean, you were talking about that a little bit ago. We have to make stuff to add battery storage to the grid. We have to make stuff, and that takes time and it takes costs, right? So hardware is really hard, as people always say, but funding it in some ways is even harder, in part because you don't get those venture-style returns really fast the way you might with a software company where 3 people in a basement somewhere can quickly spin up a thing that gets 1 million users overnight. So there's a lot been written about how tech in general with hardware is hard and takes longer, and there's the valley of death, and climate tech is even worse in a lot of ways, in part because it does take time. And you're looking at a lot of capital outlay for something that might not take place or actually help for months, years, or more. So what we're seeing is actually a lot of different kinds of money starting to enter the capital stack. And there's a lot of talk about blended finance, right? Bringing in public-private partnerships, bringing in philanthropies, different kinds of funding. As I mentioned earlier, Elemental is a nonprofit, but we act in a lot of ways like a venture fund, except I would say we can take a longer-term horizon. We don't have LPs, so there's nobody asking for their money back. We have donors, we have foundations, we have government money, and we use that to invest, but we can take a long horizon and make longer bets, knowing that we still want the return, not least because that's how we measure success of companies, right? If they don't financially succeed, they don't succeed, they go away, and whatever problem they're trying to solve doesn't get solved. So in that case, we are very much financially driven, but really what we're in is for the mission, right? We want to build these things, we want to see things happen, and so a lot of our effort is focused on how do we be here for the long haul? How do we help you grow? Some people may have noticed or heard about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund that the EPA just announced, and we are one of the sub-recipients in the winning coalitions that got that money. And a big piece of that money is designed to help take out some of the risk on some of these things and extend those runways. So you look at something where you have to deploy the first one, and that's a pilot, and you've done it, and you've shown that you can do the thing, but now you have to build 2, 3, 5, 20, 50, et cetera. And if you're doing a commercial facility of some sort where you have to get permitting, you have to get interconnection to some kind of electrical grid or whatever, it takes so much time, and there's a time delay on returning that investment, so you need that capital to come in, be patient, sit there, help de-risk that thing, and then eventually get to it. So we're seeing a lot of more activity around that, a lot more sort of mixing of funding mechanisms, and I think more is needed still, more time horizon is needed still. It gets really interesting really fast.
Yeah, and I think in some respects, you're talking about the fact that the unit economics on the early stages of these companies is really complicated to make work, and it's only after some hurdle is achieved or some time has passed that the unit economics get down to that commercially viable place.
And when you systematize the approaches, right? You figure out like how do we do the permitting? Who do we need to talk to in a community to launch this thing that we're doing, whatever it may be? Yeah, there's so many things where you learn lessons on numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, and you need the capital to get through those phases till you can scale and systematize.
Alex, please.
Yeah, and a lot of folks in the CoMotion community might remember that my previous role at Ford was working on autonomous vehicles here in Miami, and an incredibly exciting opportunity. And as you think about sort of how to apply technology, you look for business models, right? And so you always explore that Venn diagram between desirability, feasibility, and viability, right? Meaning people have to want it, it has to be technically possible, and then it has to be able to sort of self-sustain itself financially, right? And the business models that work in the long term have to check all of those boxes. For us as a foundation, we don't want underserved communities to not have access to the greatest innovations merely because they're deemed not viable, right? Because it's not a business model that can sustain itself. So we really spend time sort of honing in on the areas in our plant cities and our communities that have this acute overlap between transportation insecurity and also, socioeconomic, troubles or struggles. And we try to really develop solutions with our partners, our grantees, if you will, that can serve really direct and operational, modern today operations. The stuff we see at CoMotion is incredible in that it is so futuristic and so exciting. And I think in parallel, we want to make sure that in the present day, communities also have options to supplement the incredible work done, in the public sector, the incredible innovation already on the ground in the private sector. We're in pursuit of sort of what the right role is for the philanthropic sector to play. Where can we sort of, patch some holes for the benefit of our communities?
Thank you. So I think we see that this capital stack, sort of mixed capital stack, is an important solution, particularly when you're looking at solving things like equity issues or even basic transit issues where there's sort of this intransigent problem. And I think I'd like to turn it into something really specific and ask each of you to give 2 or 3 concrete examples, because I think it would benefit people listening to this to understand exactly where your solutions can come in and play a part of that capital stack, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I'll talk about a few of the funding opportunities that are available through the office. One, we do have a prototype grant program that we launched in March, and we know that, I think very clearly, having conversations with a number of different companies, the software side is getting a lot of the VC support, but on the hardware side, there is not that support. So as such, we have a prototype grant program. So essentially, these are for companies that are looking to make and build, and we have a program administrator that does it. And so we've set aside funding for our program administrator to run this program. It's Centropolis in Detroit, Michigan. That's one initiative. We have an Advanced Aerial Mobility Activation Fund. So essentially, we're really pooling our money with other state departments as well, specifically Michigan Department of Transportation, to think about activations for advanced air mobility pilots, and as well for work especially around infrastructure, building vertiports, but also critical inspections, how you can utilize commercial drones to move goods from one place to the next. So we're looking at all of these different use cases and opportunities. Another initiative that we have in Michigan is Flight. If you saw me on the stage yesterday, I talked about this. That's a program called Ford Launchpad for Innovative Technologies. This is a partnership between our office, the Jeral Ford Airport in Grand Rapids, and as well as Seamless Ventures. And so we essentially have, I think right now, close to 25 companies that are in that process where they have received funding and they're deploying new technologies and services within an airport setting. One company in particular that stands out is a company that's working on autonomous lawn mowing. And most people think, why should I care? But when you go to an airport, you want to make sure that there's, from a weed abatement perspective, that you don't have wildlife or birds or attracting things that would come to the airport to hang out. And we have to think about all those things from a safety perspective. We have another company that's gone through that initiative. And I met this young man, 18 years old. He's a student at Georgia Tech right now. He received funding through our program. There's an app called Spotter, and essentially if you are going to the airport and you need to park your car, essentially you have a way in which you can pretty much prearrange where your parking space is, and you'll be directed that way when you get to the airport. Autonomous Wheelchairs, another company that has gone through and is providing service to communities and people who have disabilities within the airport. And so I think these examples are just so great of how this funding is being used in the real world. That's just a small group. We also have a partnership with Detroit Smart Parking Lab. So again, companies that are looking to test or deploy new technologies and services around autonomous parking, around connected parking, around charging infrastructure, whether that's using a charging pad to charge your vehicle, whether that is using solar to charge, a solar charging station. All of those parts and pieces are being deployed at this parking lab as we speak. On the maritime side, we have so many projects.
This is great.
I can keep going. So maritime side, for those who are in the maritime community and thinking about funding opportunities as well, we have a funding platform, again, is through the Michigan Mobility Funding Platform, which we have a project called Fresh Coast Corridor. So if you are, and we have, I want to say a total of 6 companies who have gone through that process right now. LilyPad is an electric watercraft, so if those who are looking for recreational boating activities in Northwest Michigan, they're able to essentially provide this service where people are going to be using electric boats to move people and have this seamless and enjoyable experience. Same thing for the charging infrastructure. We've provided funding to a company called Aqua, and Aqua, it provides a DC fast charging infrastructure for watercraft. Essentially the same charging infrastructure that you would use to charge your vehicle with DC fast charging, it's doing the same and really activating a network of electric vessel charging stations throughout the state. These are, again, just a few examples of companies, but I have so many more. I don't want to take up all the airtime, but
you can go to the website at
yes, you can visit us at our website, michiganbusiness.org /OFME, to find more information about our funding programs and initiatives, but these companies are doing great things. I got to mention one more because I love outdoor innovation, Polaris. And so that's another company where we've worked really closely with them for outdoor charging. So essentially you think about, we have national parks and really deploying those charging solutions for people who use off-road vehicles, for people who are just visiting parks and being able to charge their vehicles. So this is not just a solution that's just for, you know, charging and walking away, but if you do have a snowmobile, if you're using some type of go-kart, ATV, this is an opportunity to plug into this network as well. So this is another company that is literally has deployed their technology, and we're looking to continue to expand services like this, grid-dependent and grid-independent solutions.
Excellent, thank you. I think that, I mean, and I'm going to ask others to continue to give some examples, but I think you can see the variety of ways in which these programs are making a real meaningful impact. Gabriel.
Sure. So, like I mentioned, we've invested in over 160 companies over 14 years. So, whole bunch of things doing a whole bunch of companies doing a whole bunch of things all over the place. I'll touch on a couple of quick examples. One of them is if you have an EV, you have probably gone to an EV charger and found that there are no cables, or that it doesn't work, or that something is broken, but it shows like it should work. So we have a company that's trying to address that. It's called Charger Help, based out of Los Angeles, and what they found was exactly that problem, right? Uptime for chargers is really bad. And so they started building out the workforce side of it, meaning people who could go out, not electricians, just people who could go out and check it and fix it for basic things. They've now built a software on top of that. Reliability as a service is the offering. And so they're trying to help roll out across the country ways to keep up the charging network that we've built, which often has problems, particularly if it's not the supercharger network, which we'll see where that goes. But anyway, so that's one company. A second company, Forum Mobility. Forum Mobility is a part of our, I guess, two cohorts ago, Project Track. And the project that they proposed to us was they wanted to work on electrifying drayage with trucking as a service and charging as a service. Drayage, if you're not familiar, are the trucks that move stuff around ports. So boats get into the port, they take boxes off, they put them on a little truck, the little truck takes them typically less than 30 miles a day. So these trucks are really good candidates for electrification because you know roughly where they're going every day, it's a relatively small catchment area, and you know roughly where they're going to be overnight. So with Forum, what we're funding is a project in Long Beach, the Port of Long Beach. The project itself sits right next to a bridge across which something like 30% of the goods that enter the US every year cross that bridge. So this project will be right next to that bridge, and they are going to be adding the capacity to charge a whole bunch of trucks and then providing the trucks themselves. Now the really interesting kicker on this is in California, there are something like 34,000 drayage drivers. And more than 80% of those are independent owner-operators, meaning it's Gabriel's trucking. And I have a truck. And I bought it 15 years ago and already might have been a used truck, which means this truck is probably a very heavily polluting truck. The places where these trucks operate typically are right next to frontline communities who have much higher rates of asthma, much higher rates of cancer. These are people getting hit with all this pollution over and over and over every day. So you've got social impacts that are huge from the trucks that are, you know, literally driving around them every day and often driven by people in those communities. Then you've got the sort of environmental side of it, which is obviously the carbon emissions, the NOx, all the rest of the stuff that comes with that. So for these drivers, again, 80% owner occupied, how do I go from a truck that's fully depreciated that I bought 15 years ago that was used when I bought it to an electric truck which costs something like $500,000? It's my trucking, but this is also my job, it's my livelihood. And to add a layer to that, California passed a law that as of this year, if you're older than 2009, you can't enter the ports, meaning I can no longer do my job. Now, that law is on hold right now. There's a lawsuit, we'll see. But that's a huge driver from a policy perspective. You've got the health side, you've got the climate side, you name it, all these pieces. So we're funding a project to deploy trucking as a service and charging as a service to help these folks. And I mentioned funding a project. We fund companies in one of two ways. There's the strategy track, which is for early stage companies. We provide coaching, $350,000, and a lot of help to get them sort of ready to scale. Then there's the project side of things, where we fund an actual project which these companies are deploying. This year, that track is $1 million to $3 million check. So fairly substantial check size. I mean, you were talking earlier in your company about needing roughly that, right, for your first deployment. So $1 to $3 million can really help. We'll be launching another track later this year, which is Growth Track, and that'll be using the GGRF funding, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction funding. That'll be bigger checks, project finance, tax credits, venture debt, all sorts of different things that we'll be playing with. So that'll be coming. And we've started piloting that, and I'll mention one last company, which is Dollar Ride. Dollar Ride is a company out of New York. They do dollar vans. So think informal transport where there aren't necessarily public transit options. They have networks of drivers who have vans who take people to and from places informally, relatively cheaply. Dollar Ride started working with those vans to systematize and give them app-based sort of access to people. And then what they saw was it would be really great if we could also convert these vans to electric. But again, it's very expensive, and you have a person who may have a van. How do I convert that to electric? So we funded a project with them in which we essentially gave them the ability to go buy 3 vans and deploy those electric vans with their drivers. And so the interesting thing about that is that's more of a debt play where you're able to give them access to capital that they can use for a while and then convert it. And so you're funding things that need to happen, but that take time to get there, to deploy, and to start generating revenue. So anyway, quick touch on some of our projects. You can see a lot more of them also on our website. Applications are open right now for the different tracks, and they're open through the end of the month. So if you are a startup and you're interested in talking to us, love to learn more, and you can look on our website, elementalaccelerator.com.
Alex, over to you.
Big Dollar Ride fan, by the way. Yeah. So at Ford Philanthropy, we think about strategically investing in 3 categories. Our 3 impact areas, if you will, are essential services, education for the future of work, and entrepreneurship. And mobility is sort of a common thread through all of them, right? We think about how to incorporate technology and transportation into all of those areas. I'll give you 3 examples of investments we've made that we're really proud of. One's from kind of each category of nonprofit, social entrepreneur, and corporate partnership. So a corporate partnership that we've invested in is with DoorDash. So for years now, DoorDash has had a social impact project called Project Dash, where they used their delivery network, their gig driver network, to deliver on behalf of food banks and anti-hunger organizations. Anywhere between 10 and 20% of commodity boxes for seniors are not picked up in some cases for reasons because of transportation. So DoorDash stepped up quite a few years ago with Project Dash. It really peaked during the pandemic, as you can imagine. And now we're sort of putting more fuel on the fire to help in our plant cities. So we've got investments with local food bank partners of ours that are using our funding to hire DoorDash, if you will, in Detroit and Memphis and in Louisville. So really excited about that. It's sort of I would say a creative way of incorporating mobility. The second is a social entrepreneur in Detroit. His name is Andy DiDeRossi. He runs a company called the Detroit Bus Company. They are old, sort of beat up school buses that he refurbishes, hires local artists to kind of graffiti the outside with really cool art. The core business, it's a social venture, right? So the core business is tours around Detroit. They do big events like weddings, if you need to move a big group in a kind of cool, grungy, hip kind of school bus. And then during off hours for those types of events, moves young people to after school programs and to community programs. So a really interesting social venture where the profits from the business funds the sort of more charitable aspect. Huge fans of what he's doing. And then, so that's a corporate partnership and a social entrepreneur. Now a nonprofit. And when I first came into this role a couple years ago, the first step I did was sort of scan the landscape for nonprofits that are working in mobility or working to address transportation insecurity. And what we quickly discovered is there just aren't the same volume as there are for other issues, right? So there are, hundreds of organizations thinking about hunger relief, for example, or homelessness, or things of that nature. But in the mobility sector, there's really quite few. But one that we found that we're really proud of is an organization called Phoenix Mobility Rising, an incredible executive director, and they are tackling this incredibly complicated topic. That's asset heavy and operationally complex and capital intensive. And they're reasonably young in their journey. I believe their organization's about six years old now. But we think they're a rocket ship in terms of someone from the nonprofit sector thinking about communities with an equitable lens, thinking about those who need transportation the most, and really trying to understand the root cause barriers for why why transportation insecurity, exists. So we're funding a few projects with them. One in Detroit, something called the Grocery Express, helping get folks to and from the grocery. Secondly, a program also in Detroit called Access to Care, getting folks to maternal health appointments, so that those critical appointments aren't skipped. The core of their work, though, and kind of the third thing that we're funding with Phoenix. So Ford's building a big plant in Stanton, Tennessee. It's a rural community in western Tennessee, about 40 or 50 miles east of Memphis. And it's going to be one of the most advanced battery electric vehicle plants in the country. It's a small rural community for now, and we're aware that the changes coming to that community are, there's a lot of positives, but there's also going to be some changes that we want to work and partner with communities to, adjust to and to, partner with our community on. And so Phoenix's model really centers around this idea of a transportation assistance hub. The idea is there are already a lot of mobility programs available in communities that are just oftentimes very complicated to understand or know that you qualify for. And so the first step is sort of assessing what exists, and if there are things that sort of don't exist or there are gaps, then Phoenix themselves will stand up an operation to move folks around, in between certain locations. They've got great technology. They're just super impressive. So I'm super happy for the opportunity to be able to plug some of our nonprofit partners and organizations that are using such creativity and innovation for good. And Phoenix is at the top of the list.
Thank you. I think that shows a really interesting array of the types of companies and organizations that are benefiting from this sort of new approach to capital, this mixed capital stack. And with a closing question I would ask, and I have a feeling I know what Alex's answer is going to be, but I'd be kind of curious about at least, I'd like to hear from all of you. For anybody looking to work with your organizations and seek capital as part of their funding, how important is it to you or your organizations that those companies, the potential is that after you invest in them, that the next stage would be another private investor, venture capital or private equity or some other private sector form of capital? How important is it to you that when you look at them in the first place that you evaluate whether you believe that after you fund them, that would be the next step? And that'll be a closing question.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the important things with our office is, again, we are still talking about a government entity that has this futuristic thinking to funding and really thinking about the future of mobility in this dialogue and conversation. For us, we know that there are going to be some companies that will make it, right, and some companies that will have to either pivot and do different things. We do offer the opportunities I mentioned before. We have test sites. So again, for companies that may say, I'm not ready to deploy in the real world, that might be a better place where they feel comfortable being in an environment where there are other early stage companies who are in this together with them and going through this process with them. But we also are putting our money to the point where we're saying we want these companies to go from cradle to commercialization, but we know that's not the case for every company. But we still have to take the risk. We still have to make the investment. We can't be afraid that a company is not going to do well. We have to say, let's put our money and make sure that these companies do have the support to scale and to go to the next phase. For example, again, our office as a state entity, we focus on those types of conversations. However, there are other funding pools available. And so, for example, Michigan Central, which is an innovation district in the city of Detroit, they have another funding source called the Scale Fund. So a lot of times as we think about companies that have gone through our process, can they take the next round of funding to say, here's a project that we want to do in the city of Detroit or elsewhere? Can they apply for scale funds as well, or other places within the state where there may be additional places for funding? Also, we are really focused on engaging the VC community. They should know that we are making these investments in a number of different companies. And we want to, again, see these companies continue to grow and to thrive, but we have to make sure that the funding can get them there. I think one of the interesting things when we think about state governments, and this is true for, I think, any state across the United States, is that Most states have incentives that they are offering to companies, and those incentives typically are going to larger companies or companies that can say, hey, here's the number of jobs that we're providing. That's one piece. There's also small business services as well. So there's funding to support small businesses. But what if you don't actually fall in any of those categories yet? So that's where our office is very unique, and Governor Whitmer created our office just to do that, to have that conversation with that company that's 0 to 20 people, maybe even less than that. And that's really important because these are high growth companies. These are companies with high potential, and we have to de-risk this essentially for other government entities, specifically other state partners, to say, this is a good idea, we should try this. So we are not afraid to make this investment, but we also know everyone may not make it at the end of the day, but we have to start somewhere. We can't just say, we can't do it because, you know, they don't have a partner backed with them right now. You have to get somewhere. You have to start somewhere so that you can get to the next phase and hopefully continue to get that second round of funding, get that commercial use case that allows your business to grow and thrive. That's where we're trying to get a number of these companies to.
All right, thank you. Gabriel.
Yeah, we're very much looking for companies that can scale. That is the point. We've got to scale technologies that really solve climate and ideally also help real people in real communities. That means big money has to come in at some point, which is going to be much bigger than what we offer. Our check size is great, and it's also not what it's going to take to grow nationally, globally for most companies, right? So even if you get a big check of 1 to 3 million, if you're trying to scale nationally, you're going to need a lot more money, and we assume that you will go and raise mostly from VC, but then there is this gap that we talked about earlier where you're starting to see more and more money needs to come into that gap as well before you get to an infra fund or something like that, or PE or whatever it is that ends up being your sort of really grown up phase. But in between there's an awful lot of water that needs to be crossed, and so we see a lot of funding coming in with us, a lot of it venture dollars, but also a lot of other.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, you know, we think about our, you know, we're entrusted with a lot of dollars from, you know, the master brand of Ford, and you know, we have to use that responsibly. And so we think about our investments largely kind of 2 buckets. One is capacity funding. If there is a nonprofit that is, you know, needs the push start, right? Needs help building the thing. You know, we think capacity, you know, funding can be really good. Second is sort of innovation funding or catalyst funding. If there are new ideas that exist that they sort of have ruminating in the back of their head that they've always wanted to build, you know, that's something we'll consider. But ultimately, we can't, you know, stand up these operations in perpetuity, right? We can't go, you know, standing up a series of shuttle services or things like that in perpetuity. Our philosophy on this is actually to bring more folks to the table, right? So if there are other corporate foundations or other foundations in general who believe in the same things we do, you know, we would love to work together because we believe so genuinely in the Phoenix Mobility Risings, the Detroit bus companies, the Project Ashes. We would love to have a coalition and, you know, bring more corporations to the table. You know, we're happy to share, you know, the love in this space. So, you know, we're open for business in that sense. You know, if there are other organizations that want introductions to some of these nonprofits and sort of social ventures, things of that nature, we think ultimately that's the way to, you know, sustain a lot of these great programs that are doing, you know, such valuable work to, you know, fill gaps that exist today.
Well, thank you. Thank each of you for coming today and sharing this information. I think there'll be a lot of organizations here and not here that would benefit from this, so I appreciate your willingness to share and be so granular, particularly because I think it helps people understand really what you're doing and how the kind of impact you're having. So thank you.